Welcome, my darlings, to my humble chateau. Please make yourself very comfortable. Relax your mind and release your imagination to me. I will bring you a story to entrance and entertain. Perhaps a frightening one. Perhaps a steampunk. Perhaps a bit of mythology. Anyway, sit back, enjoy, and subscribe to me. The Officer Sarah Barkley Chronicles, Part 10. Is this woman crazy? Or what if she's right and David and Catherine Fitz were having a psychotic breakdown? I had certainly seen people have mental breakdowns and relive their past, but I have never seen two people at exactly the same time have the same mental breakdown. Something doesn't add up. I remembered that I still had the photograph Catherine gave me in my pocket. I reached into my pocket and took out the photograph. Ma'am, is this a photograph of Emma Fitz that you said went missing 10 years ago? The woman grabbed her reading glasses off of her head and set them on her nose. She reached over and slowly took the newspaper clipping out of my hand. After studying the photograph for nearly 10 seconds, she responded, "No, this isn't the girl. I remember because Emma had blonde curly hair like Shirley Temple. Every time I saw her, I'd call her Shirley, and she would get so mad and yell at me, saying, 'My name isn't Shirley, it's Emma.'" The woman quietly laughed as she relived the memory. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't even get your name." "Oh, I'm sorry, officer. Yes, I'm Judith." I was still deciding whether or not I believed everything that Judith was telling me, but I had to investigate her knowledge further. What happened to Emma Fitz's parents after she went missing? Are they the same people who currently live there? Judith shook her head and her expression grew serious again. "No, they moved out about a year after Emma went missing. They were so depressed they just grew apart. They blamed each other for Emma's disappearance. Such a shame. Even after they moved, though, the house sat there for nearly 3 years. Everyone around here knew what happened and didn't want to move into that house because there were rumors about Emma's disappearance somehow being related to that house." Judith threw her hands in the air. "Oh, but you know how weird these small-town people can get. They think everything is haunted around here." "What do you know about the new people that moved into the house? Was their last name also Fitz?" "It's been over 6 years since that couple moved in here, and I never got to meet them. Right after they moved in, I tried to take brownies over to them, but they weren't home, so I left the brownies on their front porch with the note. They never said thank you or stopped by, so I didn't bother going out of my way to speak to them. The most I see them is when they drive by my house and turn down their lane. I did find it odd that they never took the Fitz name off the mailbox, but whatever." I thanked Judith for her time and let her know that I would possibly be stopping back tomorrow. "So is just sheer coincidence that David and Catherine have the same last name as the previous owners and have a daughter with the same name as their daughter? That's not possible. There's no way that's just a coincidence. There's something else going on here, and I'm determined to get to the bottom of it." I eventually headed back to the station for an impromptu shift meeting. I was one of the first to arrive back at the station and saw my good friend Tim there. Tim came up to me and asked, "Some weird shit, right?" I hadn't told anyone the information I got from Judith yet. I wasn't sure exactly what Tim was referring to, so I asked, "What exactly do you mean?" Tim looked surprised. "Come on, kid. You lived here back then. Even if you weren't a cop, I'm sure you remember hearing about how Emma Fitz went missing from that house like 10 years ago." "No, I honestly don't remember that, but you know how my dad always tried to keep me sheltered from what was going on in this town, because he didn't want me worried about what he did at work every day. So I'm confused, Tim. If that girl went missing 10 years ago, then what the hell happened today? Who are David and Catherine?" Before Tim could answer me, Sergeant Oakley walked in, along with the last 2 officers we were waiting on. Sergeant Oakley announced, "All right, everyone. I called this shift meeting to talk about what's going on with this Emma Fitz case. There's going to be a lot of media on this one, and there's a lot of weird confusion that's with this case. For those of you who weren't around 10 years ago," Sergeant Oakley paused and looked right at me. It's always nice to be reminded I'm the rookie in the room. Sergeant Oakley continued, "There was a little girl named Emma Fitz who went missing from that same house. We never could find her. Then today we found out another girl named Emma Fitz went missing from that same house. I know how fucked up this sounds, which is why we're here, so that I can explain to everyone the conversation I had with Mr. David and Mrs. Catherine Fitz. They aren't from this area, so when they moved here 6 years ago for David's job, they were tight on money and couldn't afford much for a house. But since Catherine was pregnant at the time, they needed a home that could comfortably accommodate their new baby. They found that house for almost half of what the market value was. As they soon found out, the reason that the house was so damn cheap was because of one huge contingency that the sellers required for the buyers to do. They required whoever bought their home to change their last name to Fitz. They wanted all official documents, white pages, everything relating to that address to have the name Fitz on it, in case their daughter Emma ever tried to find her way home. David and Catherine thought it over, but ultimately they decided to take the offer and change their last name. The previous owners left their new addresses and phone numbers for David and Catherine, and David told me that they still regularly get phone calls from them to make sure no one has moved into the house. Everyone around Amber Forest has their opinions on that house, but since they weren't from the area, they didn't view the house negatively just because a girl was kidnapped from it. And I can't blame them. I think it's stupid how paranoid people get about some of the house's histories around here. But I digress. Sergeant Oakley took a big sip of his hot coffee. I asked, "So why the hell they named their daughter Emma? That's just creepy." Sergeant Oakley responded, "Yeah, I agree, Barkley. I asked the same damn thing. They said they had no idea the prior tenant's daughter was named Emma. They just knew there was a little girl that went missing. Catherine was very upset when I told her that the little girl's name was also Emma Fitz. She started shaking and said she didn't know what made her choose that name. Her husband chimed in and told me he remembered exactly how Catherine chose the name Emma. One night, while Catherine was pregnant, she dreamed about walking down the hallway to their nursery. She saw the name Emma written on the wall. I guess she's in that mumbo-jumbo on signs or whatever, so she decided the dream was a sign to name their daughter Emma." My next question was one that everyone in the room was thinking. What the hell do we do from here? "We're going to need to talk to the original Fitzes and reopen the original missing Emma Fitz case." Hello, I'm Officer Barkley. Thank you much for taking the time to drive up here and talk with us. The male reached out his hand. I'm Roger Fitz. This is my wife, well, former wife, Lisa. You mentioned on the phone that you needed to speak with us about our daughter's disappearance. Have you found... Roger could barely finish his sentence without choking on his own words. Have you found a body? No, I'm sorry to say that we don't have any developments relating to your daughter's disappearance. We actually have another disappearance of a young girl, 6 years old, and we think the two cases could potentially be related. Lisa looked confused. Well, what makes you think they're related? I'm sure there's been other children that have gone missing over the years as well. I took a deep exhale as I prepared to explain the eerie similarities to the Fitzes. Roger and Lisa were genuinely shocked, not only to hear about the latest disappearance, but also to find out she was named Emma. I continued, so, given these similarities, that's why we asked both of you to come speak with us. Do you have any ideas or inclinations as what could happen to both your daughter and the other Emma Fitz? Lisa repeatedly shook her head. She slowly muttered, That goddamn house. I told you it's that goddamn house. Roger consoled Lisa. Roger saw that I was intrigued by Lisa's comment and added, Lisa's not fond of that house. She always thought that house had to do with Emma's disappearance. I wasn't exactly sure where he was going with this, so I asked, What do you mean when you say the house had something to do with the disappearance? Oh, I'm not saying I believe it, but Lisa here has always been adamant that the house was, haunted, I guess. She had dreams about Emma disappearing several nights prior to her disappearance. I stopped taking notes and focused on actively listening. How do you think the house contributed to her disappearance? I asked Roger my question, although it was really directed at Lisa. To my surprise, Lisa answered, That house is pure evil. Lisa intently stared at me as she responded. I left the interview room and went back out into the break room to find Sergeant Oakley gulping down a cup of coffee. Hey, Sarge, you're not going to believe the original Fitz's theory on what happened to their daughter. They think the house was haunted. Jeez, not another crazy couple. This town is filled with crazies who'd believe in that junk. Maybe I'm the crazy one for thinking they'd be more helpful with this search. I know you searched the house earlier, but I want you to go back over there with more men and do an intense search. It was not hard to take Sergeant Oakley's request as an insult to my ability to search a house. But, given the intensity of this case, I understood his decision. I offered to be one of the officers who went back to the house, and Oakley was happy to hear my willingness. Tim, Peterson, and I all went back to the house. We started in the attic, which was practically empty. We then worked our way down to the second floor and made our way through each room. We checked closets, dressers, under beds, absolutely everywhere. We had no luck finding Emma. We continued onto the main floor and checked all of the kitchen pantry cupboards, closets, even the basket of blankets next to the couch. Lastly, we worked our way into the basement. It was a small basement that consisted of one main unfinished room with a toilet in the corner. It was common to have toilets in these old houses because back when this was a coal mining town, the men would enter the house through the basement and use the toilet and shower before heading upstairs to the main house. I heard Tim quietly mumble, "What the hell?" Then he followed up with a louder, "Guys, come check this out." Peterson and I headed over to where Tim was standing, just under the stairwell. Tim was shining his flashlight against a small cubbyhole. The door did not have a handle on it, only had a plain silver faceplate with no keyhole and no mechanism on it. I leaned in close to look at the crack between the cubby door and the frame, and saw there was a deadbolt securing the door shut. "What the hell is right?" I said. "This cubby can only be locked from the inside." Peterson ran out to his cruiser to grab the breaching kit that he was assigned. The breaching kit included any and all tools we would need to open a door. He returned about 30 seconds later, and we shoved a crowbar-like tool into the cubbyhole. After Tim made a few attempts, he finally got the door open. We found a girl laying on the floor, holding on tightly to a stuffed bear. She wasn't responding when I asked her if she was all right. I crawled into the cubby space and dragged her out. She was wearing yellow overalls. I placed my pointer and middle finger on her neck and felt for a pulse. It was weak, but she had a pulse. I immediately called for medics and repeatedly attempted to get a response from her. She slowly opened her eyes, but was unable to speak. It had been nearly 24 hours since she went missing. Medics arrived on the scene, and I rode in the ambulance with her to the hospital. Tim and Peterson remained on the scene to gather evidence and to determine if any foul play was involved. Sergeant Oakley met me at the hospital. Sergeant Oakley came up to me outside of Emma's room where she was being treated. He advised, "I spoke with the guys, and it sounds like Emma locked herself in that cubby. There's no way anyone else could have locked her in there. And there was nothing inside of that cubby that appeared suspect. This was yet again the typical outcome of a child hiding in her own home, but for some reason she must not have been able to get the lock open again." I replied, "Wow, that must have been so terrifying for her. Are you sure the parents had nothing to do with it? Why didn't they hear her scream? Why did her mom hand me that newspaper photograph instead of a real one?" Sergeant Oakley shrugged his shoulders. "Those old houses are built pretty solid. Maybe they couldn't hear her scream from all the way upstairs, especially if they had an AC unit running or other appliances. I agree it was weird she chose to give you a newspaper clipping, but that isn't a crime. These young millennials nowadays don't even keep printed photographs around the house anymore. Sure, they can take pictures when they have babies and keep them in frames, but after that, all they do is post them to social media. Maybe that was the most recent photograph she had." While still suspicious, everything Sergeant Oakley theorized was plausible. I waited at the hospital until Emma's parents came to see her. They went running into her room and cried while grasping their daughter. I let them become reacquainted with their daughter before asking Emma any questions. I waited until her parents were there because it's not advised to question a minor without their parents present. I introduced myself. "Hi, Emma. I'm Sarah. I'm a police officer. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?" Emma smiled and said, "Sure." "You gave your parents quite the scare with hiding in that cubbyhole. Why did you go down there?" "I was playing hide and seek, but I couldn't get the door open after I closed it. Then I fell asleep." "And why did you go down into that cubbyhole?" "Emma wanted to go in there." Caitlin corrected Emma. "Emma, remember what we talked about before? Try not to refer to yourself as Emma. Just say I or me when you're talking about yourself, sweetie, okay?" Emma responded to her mom, "I know, Mom. I'm talking about the other little girl with the same name as me." I quietly made my exit and headed back to the station. I told Sergeant Oakley that he was right. Emma was just a kid who found a place to hide and accidentally got herself locked in the cubbyhole. And he could tell Roger and Lisa Fitz they are free to go home. So quoth this raven. Well, my dears, there is more to come, but it looks like this one wasn't quite as easily explained. There are big logics and little mysteries in her writing. I do enjoy that. And if you did, please like my video so I know. Subscribe if you haven't done so, and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And if you leave a comment, I will do my best to comment back. Thank you, my darlings. Bye-bye.